Hi, in this video, I'm going to explain about a common use case with working with multiple people working on the same data set on a GIS data set, for example, a PostGIS, and it is actually a very common use case where, for example, you have a team working on the same data set, for example, this table here, and you store the data into PostGIS, and each of these people work with uh, the same data set, and one of the people just edit some part of the data set, and then the other one maybe they update the attributes, and then the other one they have another editing, for example, they add a feature, something like that. And this is a very common use case for a team working on the same data set. And another one use case that is also quite common is that some user working on a different part of the data set, which is should be combined into a single data. So, for example, one of the user work with adding the data or modifying the attributes of a table, and then the other one modifies. So this should be in here, modify the second table, and then the third one modify the third table. And all of this data, we need to, for example, we need to display a single union or a single merge file of all this data set into one. And then, for example, we want to display the data into GeoServer. So I'm going to explain about how we could achieve this using PostGIS, and it's called the feature is called audit trigger, and this feature is actually have been around for quite a long time, and maybe you also going to find some documentation about audit trigger, or else we can just call them versioning, where we can track and we keep record of who does what and when. For example, if this user, let's say is user one, they add some feature, and then the user two, they delete some feature, user three, they modify some part of the attributes or some part of the data set, and then this versioning or this audit trigger in PostGIS or PostgreSQL SQL in general will record each of these transaction, each of this action, and then we can just refer. For example, if one user does some mistakes in adding the data or deleting the data, then we can just refer them into the previous version. So it's kind of like a GitHub or a GIS in general. And then we can save, and we can just use the data set that is free from error. So that's the general idea. And if you are looking to some more permanent solution, there actually one solution by one of the developer of QGIS. You can find the video in YouTube. Victor Olaya explained about using this plugin, this library called Car Project, and it's actually quite good. And you can use this car project to versioning, and it's more robust. You can do like version control. If you use GitHub extensively, then this is quite feel like a home. But the thing is that, sorry, the thing is with car project, the current state is they don't allow us to connect directly to save the repository into PostGIS or somewhere else. So it is not possible at this moment to use a card project for versioning across several teams. So the solution that I'm going to discuss in this video is about using the audit trigger. So this is actually extensive documentation also in PostGIS and also in PostGIS. And I'm not going to discuss about having these SQL scripts. We can just use the SQL script that's been made. So you can find them here in gitlab.com/Auslandia/audit trigger. So this SQL script is based on the script that is previously used to audit trigger by second quadrant, and then this script can be downloaded. So we can just open this audit.sql and then download the script. I've already downloaded them. And then we are going to use this script in a PostGIS database. So for example, I have this local database here, and I have several tables in here. I have 3 tables in here. It's called geocode, Indonesia, and then Hanwha Station. And we are going to track any change that the users, so multiple users are conducting on these different tables. So the way to do this is that the first one is to set up your database. So you need to install PostGIS extension into this database, and then you also need to install any kind of other extension that you need, for example, like PG routing or something else. And then you need to install this script that you downloaded from the script here in audit SQL. So it's just an SQL script. You can see this there's a comment in here if you really want to know how it works. But once we download them, and then just open your PostgreSQL interface such as pgadmin, and then run the script. Just open the script and load the script. This is the audit.sql that I've downloaded, and then select them and just run them. So in this case, all of the script is already running in my PostGIS database. So the notice said it is already existing. But the script, you can check that they give us this extension. So we have store extension in here, and then we also have a new schema called audit, where if we look at the table, they have 2 tables here. We have log action and then log relation, and both of these tables here is the one that we are going to use to record the row-based modification. So row-based modification is that when we doing some kind of modification, any modification, create, read, update, or delete to this row. For example, if we want to modify one of the value here, and then we add new features, and then we delete new features. So we can, all of that modification will be recorded in this logged action. And then we also monitor which tables that we are going to track. So we can just limit just several tables, not all of the table, using this log relations. And then we can select which table that we want to record using this approach. So let's start recording the transaction using audit trigger on this table. So you can see that the Hanwha station have been registered. I have registered this table in the past, and we want to register this geocode Indonesia. The way we do this is by we can go to the repository, and sorry, I think it's this one. So the script is this one. We just select, and then let's create a new audit table. So the way this works is by recording a new, okay, so it's like this. By recording every action, and then the action will trigger some record, and the record will be stored in the corresponding tables. And then the idea is that we can just revert the table into its previous version by using the information that we have in this table. Okay, so we want to, in this case, we want to modify the geocode Indonesia table. So let's just select and put them here. Since this is on the public scheme in here, So we write public and then dot geocode Indonesia. Yeah, and then we run the script. So we can see now that we have a new audit table. We can see in here, let's check. Yeah, so we are now tracking the modification that is happening in both this Hanwas station, then also in this geocode Indonesia table, and then every action create, read, update, and then delete every row that happens on every row. Then this action will be recorded in here. So we can see the example of the recorded action is something like this. It's called event ID and then schema name. This is the public schema, and then the table, because we haven't done any modification to the geocode Indonesia. So the recorded one is the one that I recorded earlier. And then the user. So this is one of the important features. So we can track which user who does the modification and then when and what feature is modified. So this is the modification that this particular user have conducted in the past. So you can see this update and then set status. This is the attribute, and then we change the attribute. And I'm going to demonstrate about how we can use this feature to track the modification of each row in QGIS. So we just open QGIS, and then the first thing to do is to connect the data, the PostGIS, the QGIS to PostGIS using this connection in here. So you just input the host. For example, if this is a remote PostGIS, then just input the IP address and then the port and database. So after that, we can just connect the data. And for example, I want to add and modify this public GeoNode Indonesia. Okay, so in this case, I want to underline that anyone can connect to the data. So for example, if we have three person in here, anyone can connect at the same time, and using QGIS to connect directly to PostGIS. And then using QGIS, they can modify the feature. For example, they can modify the data, the attribute of this feature, and then they can also modify the geometry. They can add new geometry and or delete any geometry in here. And then all of these activities will be recorded in this audit trigger table. But we need to understand that there are limitations of this approach because we cannot modify the schema. So for example, geocode Indonesia have this column here. We have ID and then FID, kecamatan, kelurahan, etc. We can't modify, for example, we cannot add another data set in here, another column in here. So we can just, we can only do like data manipulation language. We can modify the data, but we cannot do the data definition language or DDL operation, like adding new columns or deleting a column, because we cannot modify a schema. So, okay, we have this data in here, and then we want to modify, and let me demonstrate how to going back in time using the extension. The first one is to connect the data using PostGIS, and then the second one, we need to install the plugin for this purpose. We can just see it's called, yeah, history viewer for PostgreSQL. So this plugin will connect to the PostGIS using the audit trigger table, and then we can refer any modification that anyone does to the database, to the table, and then we can have a new version. Okay, so I have installed this plugin, and after installing, then we have this menu in here called PostgreSQL History Viewer. And before doing any modification, we need to first have the configuration set, just enter the username and password, just local, so you can see this is actually Postgres. Okay, and then if the database connection is not shown, you can just select which connection that we want to use. In this case, it is local PG that I've made earlier. And then let the audit table into audit.log action. And the default function, this will be inactive, the replay function. So it's just recording and we cannot replay the function. But in this case, we want to replay, or we want to going back in time. So select this replay function, activate the checkbox, and then we select the audit dot rollback event, because we want to roll back into any edit that we have conducted into the data. And then from the list of layer, we select which layer that are going to be monitored. It is this one that we add using a PostGIS connection in QGIS. And then the last step is to select which corresponding database table in PostGIS. So it should be this one, public geocode Indonesia. And then click on OK. So now we are ready to monitor any action that are going to be conducted in QGIS. So let me modify this layer here. For example, I want to add a new feature in here. Yeah. So because since this is from PostGIS, we have the ID which is a serial primary key. It is filled automatically. I will just leave the other fields empty. And then I'm going to save this. Okay. So now this new data set has been recorded in PostGIS. We can actually see the data, but let's see whether this modification have been recorded in the log action. Okay, so previously I've shown this table and it's only contained the Hanway station, but now it contains this geocode Indonesia, a new row in here with the modification is today, and then you can see the application that is doing the modification is QGIS, and the user doing the modification is Postgres. We can actually, this is not a good practice to have anyone access the same username. We should allocate a different username to with different privileges to any kind of database. And then we can also see what kind of modification that this user have been conducting. So we see here, we add a new data set, insert into, and then this data set here is added to the database. Okay, so now we are able to record the data, but what if we want to going back in time? We are using time machine here, and we want to come back, we want to get back to the previous version of this data. We can use this using the list event in here. So like the one that is showing in PG admin, currently we see that there is a new modification here. We can actually see this quite nice user interface here. We can see the old geometry and then the new geometry. We can also display the modification in the main canvas. We see this modification here, this column value, which is added automatically by PostGIS. And then we see the action here is insertion. So if we want to replay, we want to go back in time, and then we want to go to the old geometry. We can just click on replay, and then the action will be deleted, and then we can see here. Let's just remove them. Okay, so the feature is now deleted, and then this version is automatically saved into a new version which is not which does not contain any data set. So that's how we track any modification or any correction to this data set using PostGIS plugin, PostGIS, and then QGIS plugin to to track any modification. Okay, so now what if we want to we want to create a different version of the data? We can just use PostGIS or also QGIS for this purpose. So for example, let me delete some of this data here. Let's just delete them. Okay, this is a very extreme case. And I accidentally save this deletion in here. And for example, we want to save the state of this layer where the data is not the data doesn't contain all of this land parcel in here. We can use QGIS to export and then save the data and then upload the data later into PostGIS, or we can just use the duplicate table function in PostGIS or PostgreSQL. We can do something like this. So we see here we have 3 tables and we want to make another table. We can just create something like, let me remember this. Select into, let's call them geocode new. Okay, so this query actually duplicate the data from geocode Indonesia into the new table geocode new. So if you run this table here, we will have the new version, this geocode new, and let's add this data to QGIS2 is this one. Okay, so now we have 2 data set in here. The first one is connected to our audit table, and then the second one is the new version of the data with all these deleted features in here. So let's try to, okay, we have a lot of tables in here because I've deleted a lot of things in here. Let's go back to this state. So this is before I delete all of these tables in here. I deleted one of the addition that we add earlier. And yeah, okay, so let's just try to replay this and see what's going on. Okay. Okay, I'm not really sure about what's going on, but let me see. All right. So one of the problem with this approach is that we can only going back one feature each time. We can just we can't like something like this. We jump to the previous 2 action if we want to replay this. Oh, we can just do that too. All right, let's do this. All right. Okay, so now I have a lot of new version, and most of the parcel have been returned, but I get lost of track of where each feature are. So pardon me, and you get the idea. We can just replay each version and coming back to the previous version of this layer, and then basically if we do this modification into the old layer, then the new layer will not be affected. So we have 2 different version. We have the new version, and then we have the old version with we need to also revert this action too. So that's how the configuration works. So this way we can have like multiple version of this layer, and then we can have multiple users using the same data set, and then we can have also, for example, if we have a person 1 working with one part of the table, and then the person 2 working with another part of the table, and then person 2 working with the last part of the table, and we can join them using PostGIS view, which in turn we can add this layer of PostGIS view into GeoServer as a combined layer, and at the same time we track the modification of each table and each layer, and then we can have working versioning using PostGIS. But again, I advise to look at card project. This is a better approach for this one. And once this plugin and once this software have the functionality to connect to PostGIS, then it will be much better. Thank you for sharing. Have a nice day.